the first steps of anything. If I know what information I have, I know how my processes work and how information and people and technology work together to drive those processes. And I target my core processes that really influence, that move the needle in terms of my organizational performance and innovation and profitability and customer service, all those KPIs or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, I have something in hand that I think has a vital roadmap for how I might move forward strategically with all the other things that we love to talk about, whether that's process automation or AI or robotic things or whatever. All of that's all for naught if we don't have our hands around the information that we have and the processes that we use every day that really move the needle in terms of organizational performance. It sounds simple.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of content in the enterprise that people shouldn't even know exists.
We're waiting for the industry to catch up to us.
You're talking about the empowerment of the individual over the empowerment of the establishment.
So what would you suggest if you had a magic ball or a magic wand, I guess, maybe a magic ball and a magic wand, using them together in great aplomb and skill, what would you suggest otherwise?
Yeah, so the suggestion a lot of times is when things aren't working, lower your standards. And what I mean by that is organizations are having a hard time keeping up with the data sprawl and the data growth. And their expectations have been a finger wag saying, you better put that in that other thing, and you better put the metadata on the document. Yeah. And that hasn't worked. So I'm going to say, lower your expectations of your users. Just get rid of that thinking. Okay. If you've asked your child to clean the room every day for the last 365 days and they haven't, I don't know what tomorrow is going to be different. So let's push that aside and say, let's do what we can. Well, what can we do? Okay, well, it's a shameless plug for our software. We can go and find where every file is, and we can layer on some technology to find out what it is. And if we have videos in there, then we can bring in the best of things like Google or Amazon or Microsoft technology to transcribe those videos and make it text searchable as well. We can layer on things like TensorFlow and AI to identify, are there particular patterns in these documents? Built into systems like ours, it has discovery search, it has likeness searches and natural language to be able to find people's names, PII, and other things. And these are kind of lowering your standards, but it is empowering the data that's going to drive those additional decision making for your business. Now you can go off. Like the power of any network is the square of the connections between the nodes. So if there's only one phone in the world, it has a power of one. But if there's 100 phones, then it's 100 squared, because everybody is now connected. And it's the same thing with your data. Like the reason why Facebook is powerful is because I can ask questions of Facebook as an advertiser. I can say, show me everybody that is in California who is an influencer in this type of content services area, and your name's going to pop up in there. And you'll look at that and go, well, that's amazing. And why wouldn't businesses want to ask those same kind of questions? Show me all the data that relates to this asset over here in the field. Okay, because these assets, they're very expensive to maintain, and having people and staff ready to go maintain them, it's very expensive to have bench strength that's not out there actually doing active maintenance for these activities. Even worse, if I can't find the document to support what was the last pressure test on that pipe? Oh, it was done in 1967. Well, where's the documents? Well, we don't know. Oh, we got to dig it up for millions of dollars just to measure it and bury it again. So good information practices, that's this infinite game of activity, is going to get you out of those jails. But I mean, that requires you to think differently. It's not just throwing it into, well, let's just put it over there and then start doing something with it. It is understanding it where it is before you make those decisions, which nobody has talked about until oddly enough, it feels like we're kind of inventing this idea. And I don't feel like it's an invented idea. To me, it seems fairly obvious.
And then and we've been talking sort of on the risk side of things, compliance or cost mitigation, but there is a great deal of opportunity on the horizon that we don't even know. We may not even know what that opportunity is until it presents itself. And then when it does present itself, we need to be able to react quickly. And it seems to me that one way to be able to leave your slower moving competitors in the dust is to have that sort of information awareness and agility and acumen within how we use it in our systems that is part of the new normal that will give us competitive advantage. Do you have any suggestions on how to build that, or any examples of folks that you feel are doing that well today?
Yeah, the organizations that are taking a serious look at it are the ones who are feeling a bit of the pinch to innovate because there's some pressure from outsiders. And what I mean by that is like the oil and gas energy producers are seeing organizations like Tesla, Amazon, Google, Apple. Every one of them has expressed interest in how they can transform the energy industry. And if I'm a bondholder for a multi-billion-dollar power plant, and or I'm my job is to take oil out of the ground and get it to the refinery so that they can go through distribution channels and other things, I'm very aware that there's somebody out there who has a more innovative edge than I do that wants to eat my lunch. They want to have the fact that Amazon already has everybody's credit card, which means they can have a slipperier time providing you more services, perhaps including you can pay your power bill through them, including pay your water bill through them. That's obviously would be the dream for a company like Amazon, and they're already poised to do it. And they've expressed interest into getting into all of these other areas. So if I'm a traditional brick and mortar company that builds these big monolithic things under bonds, I'm going, geez, what can I do to get a competitive advantage? I become very aware that, man, I have a whole team of 50 people. What do they do all day? They scan in a document and then manually type in what they see on it. That's not industry transformative. That's terrifying. We need to somehow innovate our way through that. Uh, so those are the types of companies that I'm seeing who are traditional laggards, who are now all of a sudden hiring innovation managers to say, well, what can we do, and experimenting with smaller companies. Like when we first started working with some municipalities and provinces and federal governments and others, we were a dozen people. And there's no way that would have happened 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
As a dozen person organization going into a power plant. But it happened 5 years ago because they were desperate. They're like, we got to try something new, and the big vendors aren't giving us something new. And so that allowed us to grow, double our size year over year over year for the last few years. And in that, so kudos to those organizations who are recognizing it. But you shouldn't have to wait around for some big innovator to say, I'm threatening you, before you start to innovate. It should be really part of any practice.
No, you should assume that threat is there, a clear and present danger, regardless of whether you're aware of it or not.
For sure.
Well, which that all brings us back to the Magic Quadrant report. I mean, we see some rather, interesting moves. Microsoft taking a commanding lead. Some of the former leaders that we're used to, OpenText and IBM, having a rather precipitous drop. I think maybe we're seeing that as a reflection of what the new normal will really be post-pandemic, or now today. It won't be monolithic. Organizations will embrace new ways of working that I think maybe are more well represented within Microsoft's approach and their philosophy. Certainly their marketing and awareness philosophy as compared to, say, IBM, or their lack of complexity, or their ease of and integration of services, maybe as opposed to OpenText. Where do you come down on the Magic Quadrant report? You haven't been kind necessarily. Should we just disregard the report? I mean, as a user and as an analyst, I have come to rely on the Gartner report, and I think many folks do. But where do you come down on that? Should we just disregard the report as really not hitting the mark, or what?
So we're not the first time that innovation caught people by surprise. For example, like if you look at a $1 trillion market cap for Bitcoin right now, we don't have to go deep into Bitcoin, but I think we would all agree that most people laughed it off. You were buying pizza for 10,000 Bitcoins 10 years ago, and we would all
Right.
do some crazy things to try to get 10,000 Bitcoin right now. So a lot of times we kind of disregard some important innovations in the space. And what I look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant is not that they're saying wrong things or whatever. It is of its time and it's hard to change. But I say the real solution has always been there, and it is a plurality. It's a commonality of ISO 15,000 series for records management has never been wrong. The idea of content needing a classification and a life cycle and metadata has always been right. And that's demanded in the Magic Quadrant. Good, that makes sense to me. Also, you need a way of finding the information. Okay, somehow that appears in a completely different Magic Quadrant. Somehow that's in like enterprise search or cognitive search someplace else. And then you need a way of doing analytics to actually bring that content to the systems. Well, that's in a separate Magic Quadrant yet again with whole different vendors in there. So what I'm suggesting is a customer can't be so narrow focus with the blinders on, saying I'm just going to look at content services. Boom, that's what they say for content services. Check. And I'm going to eliminate any other vendor who's not mentioned there, because you know what? If you don't do the file analytics first, you're going to do a poor job with your content services. If you don't have an enterprise search strategy, then nobody's going to like your content services or your file analytics. You've got it. Look, going over to a periphery thing that we should talk about is the whole idea of driving your business with artificial intelligence. Everybody's trying to do that, and the data scientists are going, the data you guys have is crap. That's the whole narrative that we hear for the last year, is businesses' data is crap. And I go, yeah, you're right. That's because nobody's ever gone back to the file analytics and done a good job of that. So you have four perhaps more Magic Quadrants that when you line them all up as a strategy for a CIO, as a strategy for a CEO and board, and say, I'm not just going to do one of these. Oh, our priority is content services, but forget the others. We'll do that in 2026. You're in trouble. Yeah. You need to have a holistic view of this whole thing and then say, okay, who's going to get us there? And I bet you it's not one vendor from one of those Magic Quadrants. It's going to be a holistic view. I think we joked around in our last interview about it's not saying who's doing a good job of regional and international transportation. That's a silly question. Is it Boeing, or is it Chrysler, or is it like whatever? I don't know. It's everybody who's a governor, through to standards makers, through to manufacturers, through to police and regulatory compliance. There's a plurality of things that happen. So if we don't look at these Magic Quadrants for just saying this is what it is in the state that it's evaluating, if that's the only lens that you look at it through, you are too focused on one thing, and you got to step way back and look at the whole thing and saying, I'm a big player in a big industry. I need to look at a number of things, and I'll need help doing that.
Yeah, lots of parts and pieces to consider. Absolutely. And I'll tell you what will help hear consistently from practitioners in records and information management that they struggle to get a seat at the table. And so I think CIOs and executives would be well served to bring more folks from that area into their sphere of influence in terms of strategic decision making, along with maybe forward looking people from marketing and product development alongside the IT and records management folks to get, like you said, a holistic view of information, its value, and how it can really be leveraged to improve organizational performance.
I agree. And it doesn't have to be coming to the table with, I've solved all your problems, or here's my plan to make our business 10 times richer. It should be more along the lines of just understanding what's going on in your business, creating a map. Like I don't sell anything to do with process mapping, but there is vendors out there who help you with your process mapping. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about business process management or RPA. I'm just saying things that identify what people do with information and how information flows through your organization. Yeah. Build that map. Have people build the map and show you what people are actually doing. Where can you find inefficiencies there? File analytics. Every time we've generated a report that says this is the information that you have, it skips through to the CIO and it goes to the CEO and it goes to the board, and they look at them. That's a wow. Okay. Yeah. The CIO and the board never look at their content managed. How many record series do we have? They never ask that question. They don't care. Maybe your legal counsel does, but nobody else does. Whereas these big picture, here's what you have, here's the scope of your problem or your opportunity, those things always find their way up. So I think that's the thing that you ask as you bring more people to the table is just, okay, you're in that area of process management, show me what you've got. You're in the area of information services, show me the information that we've got. Let's come in and have a look at the scope of our challenge, and then we'll start layering on ideas and talking to vendors about solving this, rather than the knee-jerk of, okay, we'll bring in, let's put it out to RFP and let the vendors drag us in a particular direction.
Well, you've mentioned two really powerful things, I think. An information audit, if you will, or I don't know what you would call that, understanding what information you have, and then a process mapping you just mentioned. To me, those are two essentials that really work together, if not step one, step two, certainly the first steps of anything. If I know what information I have, I know how my processes work and how information and people and technology work together to drive those processes, and I target my core processes that really influence, that move the needle in terms of my organizational performance and innovation and profitability and customer service, all those KPIs or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, I have something in hand that I think has a vital roadmap for how I might move forward strategically with all the other things that we love to talk about, whether that's process automation or AI or robotic things or whatever. All of that's all for naught if we don't have our hands around the information that we have and the processes that we use every day that really move the needle in terms of organizational performance. It sounds simple.
Yeah.
Why don't we do it more often? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think we do. I think it's just that it's harder for people to think that way. A vendor will never tell you to rewrite your RFP if they know they can bid on it and win.
Well,
And that's the big challenge, is that we'd be much better off to actually have vendors say, you know what would be better than we may still win that RFP the way it's written, but you know what would be better for you if you rewrote it this way. Nobody ever does that. So that's why we end up with these half solutions or solutions that you have to redo every 5 years. It's because self-serving, and I'm sure I've done that in the past too, is that, well, I can
of
win
course,
that
you
bid,
folks
so
are way different. Yeah.
Oh, geez, I wish I could say
You would
that,
never
but
do something like that.
yeah. But it actually, I will tell you a story that we did do with an RFP bid. Is we put in there with rewards for the customer to bring the right financial rewards for the customer to bring the right people during the process, because the customer wanted to have some guarantees on delivery dates. So we said, okay, well, you're going to pay this amount, but we'll give you this number of year 2 service credits if you can make sure that this person comes in and does their data analysis with our tool at this point, and this next person comes in. And it was really kind of, it blew the customer's mind a little bit, going, well, what do you mean you're giving me service credits for just doing what we're supposed to do in the first place? And I reminded them, nobody fails because the software ever fails. Like, OpenText software works, Microsoft software works, our software works.
Right.
What the problem is that can you get the people doing the right thing at the right time, and are they even willing to do it? So let's incentivize people to take those actions, because outcomes matter so much more than capabilities.
Yeah.
So how do you get the outcomes? You drive the people.
Agreed. Well, all right. Well, Gartner Magic Quadrant Content Services Platforms, November 2020. An interesting story. We'll expect to hear more as things unfold in the new normal.
Yeah, I appreciate you spending the time today, Kevin. It's fun to riff with you on this kind of stuff, and I hope it was fun, because I know you do a lot of interviewing, and you've got a lot of thoughts that I was happy that you could share them and we could extract that today.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's really been my pleasure being with you today, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to talk again soon.
Great. Take care.